but I started liking it. I found myself really enjoying, being on stage and kind of like making a fool out of myself. And then that pretty much led to me being interested in stand-up and comedy and, sketch comedy and acting and that kind of stuff.
After an award-winning sellout tour in 2023, comedian Cameron James is set to bring his show Mixtape to Newcastle Con. Here's the chat that Dan had with Cam ahead of the show on the 7th of July.
Okay, so you're bringing Mixtape home for the Newcastle Comedy Festival.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about, first of all, how the show's been received in Melbourne and other shows that you've done with Mixtape.
Yeah, sure. So I think currently I've been in Perth, Adelaide, and Melbourne. I'm about to do Brisbane and Sydney before Newcastle. It's been good, man. I've been doing comedy for I think 14 years. This is the most audience I've ever had. This is the most amount of people that have ever come see me, which is so cool. I think it's just literally because I've been around for a little while now. I reckon that's the secret to success is just stick around.
For long enough?
Stick around for long enough. And eventually people will be like, oh, okay, I guess this guy's not going anywhere. Let's go watch his show.
He's worn me down.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, look, I want to talk about why people turn up to the shows in a minute, but let's talk about Mixtape. From the outside looking in, I'm a child of the 80s and 90s, man. Mixtapes were a huge thing for friends. God forbid you send it to a love interest.
Yeah.
Maybe someone sent Suddenly by Angry Anderson to one of their crushes. I'm not saying which one of us that was. But I know that it's a little bit more than that. And I know that, especially for Newcastle, part of this show talks about, that time that you worked at a theatre restaurant in Newcastle. So I want to dig a bit of dirt on that because I happen to work at that theatre restaurant in Newcastle as well. Tell me about that part.
The theatre restaurant that we're not going to name, but we know what it is. And any other Novocastrians will know what it is as well. Look, it was a very formative part of my life because I was in a transition point, I guess, with what my goals were in life. As a teenager and early 20s, all I really cared about was playing in bands and being a musician, and that's all I wanted to be. Was the Daniel Johns of the new generation. And then I injured myself, could no longer play guitar, still enjoyed singing and performing, but had no idea where to put that energy. I got this job at the theatre restaurant, mainly because I knew that it would involve singing. And what I didn't really account for was just how much comedy and acting were going to be a part of that job. And I was really embarrassed at first because you had to dress up and play a character. And I'd never really done anything like that before. But I started liking it. I found myself really enjoying, being on stage and kind of making a fool out of myself. And then that pretty much led to me being interested in stand-up and comedy and, sketch comedy and acting and that kind of stuff. So when I really think back on that time of my life, I think of that as a period where I learned to become the person that I am now. But more than that, to tie into your prelude about giving a mixtape to a lover, this is around the time that I went through probably my first very serious relationship as well, and all the ups and downs that involves, including a very dramatic breakup and all of that stuff. And this was all while I was working at that theatre restaurant that we're not naming.
And how did you, I'm being upfront, I haven't seen the show. I'm looking forward to seeing it when you bring it to town. But how did you approach, especially, when you bring it home, how did you approach, not naming the restaurant, but talking about the things that some people may go, I remember that. I was there when that happened.
Yeah, I've done a trial show version of it in Newcastle already, and that was really fun because I decided at a certain point to change the name and change a few people's names because it's just easier. It's just easier to not have to deal with reality, and to change a few details gives me a bit more freedom to move the timeline of the story around a little bit and whatnot. And when I did my first trial show of it in Newcastle at the Newcastle Comedy Club, I just said at the start, hey, some of you guys might recognize some places and some things that happened, but just so we all know, I'm changing the name, but you probably all know what I'm talking about. And that was fine. People get on board at that point.
Of course.
Everywhere else in the country, it's just a story to them. They don't really know. So it was I just really wanted to tell this story because it was a very important time of my life when I was learning how to fall in love with someone and learning how to become a grown-up, I suppose, at the same time, learning to let go of a music dream and to chase a different dream. And yeah, it was just, when I think of it, I think back on that time of my life, almost like a coming of age movie or something, you know what I mean? And I just kind of wanted to tell it.
Do you think places like that are a magnet for people going through those points in their life? Because I look at the characters who work there, and from all the spectrum right to a lot older people and the young people that were there, I feel like everyone was going through some sort of transition and used that as their, not platform, but as part of their working out. Did you feel like that? That was a magnet for it?
Such a great point. Yeah, you definitely would have noticed that too. And I'm so glad you mentioned that there were older people. It wasn't just young people in their early 20s who were, trying to figure out how to be a singer or an actor or whatever. There was older people that had come from, they'd played in bands and maybe that time was behind them a little bit. And this was just a platform for them to do the thing they loved, which was get up on stage and sing K-Sant or whatever the hell it was,
Yeah.
And there were people that had come through theatre and maybe done local theatre, and they really enjoyed that outlet for themselves. Honestly, I think you're absolutely right. This is a local theatre or local theatre restaurants or whatever. It just draws in the creatives and the people that have always felt maybe a little bit outside, and it gives them a home, a place to kind of belong. And I always look back on it fondly, because that's what it was for me.
Yeah, me too. It's interesting how things look in the rearview mirror as opposed to when they're in front of you. But I want to talk about, music was such a huge part of your life, and you've been able to meld that now into your comedy. You've actually got a single out, which I heard through the Becky and Cam show.
Yeah.
Was it always music was going to be part of your comedy, or did that come after you got your stand-up legs? When did that happen?
The second one for sure. I avoided using music in comedy for the longest time because
sometimes people call it a bit of a crutch using
exactly
music.
Yeah, like the cliche thing that people say is if you have a guitar on stage, they call it a 6-string applause machine.
Yeah.
And I've been guilty of saying shit like that too. I avoided it for a long time because, first of all, I just took music so seriously when I wanted to do it. And the idea of doing comedy music, I was like, I would never bastardize the art of music just for a laugh, So I didn't do it for a long time. And then when COVID happened, I wasn't able to perform anymore, and I was fucking depressed and I was at home, and I realized I hadn't played my guitar in 5 or 6 years. So I started playing the guitar again just for fun at home. And then just really realized how much I missed that in my life and how much I missed that feeling of being able to stand on stage and, come up with cool chord progressions and melodies and stuff. And then it just sort of became an experiment, seeing if, can I still use those old muscles I used to have when it came to writing songs, but can I merge that with the comedy? And there's obviously a big precedent of people that have done it before, like Flight of the Conchords and Adam Sandler, Tim Minchin. There's so many people that have done it and are still doing it. And I just wanted to see if there was anything I could do that was, you know, in that world and still felt like me. And it's been, of all the things I've done, it's probably been the thing that's gotten me the most laughs and the most work as well. Like you mentioned, I have a couple of songs out now, and you know, one of them that I played at the Melbourne Comedy Festival Gala a month ago, which is a clip that's online now. The song's called Medium Dick.
It's so good.
It's gotten me the most views I've ever gotten on anything. I mean, I was like, really? This is all it took was for me to go back to the things that I wanted to do when I was younger and do a dick joke version of it. It's fun though. I love it. Like, it's enjoyable for me. I'm glad I get to sing and play guitar on stage again. It makes me feel like I'm, you know, 21 all over again. It's crazy.
And I want to finish up. Look, you know, we're really looking forward to this show. It's going to be a sellout, so get your tickets. You say, you know, you joked at the start of the interview that, you know, being around long enough is, you know, oh, we better go and see this guy's show. He's been around long enough. I know you're only joking there, but I would also argue that you've been really prolific, Cam. Like, so, you know, some people might know you from the stand-up. Some people might know you from, you know, medium-sized dick on YouTube. You know, a lot of people have bought into the Cam world through your podcasts, and I feel like you've created a little community around you. And I suppose I want to ask, you know, I know that when I heard Finding Drago, I'm pronouncing that right, aren't I? You know, that was...
I think so. I think we were pronouncing it wrong. I think it's Drago.
Drago, right.
Yeah.
That was sort of my buy-in to find you doing all this other stuff besides stand-up. And, you know, it opened up a world. I started listening to the Becky and Cam hotline, which became the Becky and Cam, which, you know, my teenage son, absolutely, we used to listen to the hotline show on the way, dropping him off to school, and got many laughs out of that. But I feel there's been this sort of community. How did you find that? And how do you think that's helped get to where you are now from where you started in comedy?
Oh yeah. I don't know. I think I doing podcasting was something I was really nervous about at first, because I'd never just talked and been myself on anything. You know, doing stand up, you're always doing a heightened version of yourself. And I think it took me a long time to figure out how to just talk and be comfortable and try to get laughs from being me rather than, like, you know, trying too hard. But I think I finally did figure out a way to do it, I suppose, just from time. And maybe that's part of it, is just like you eventually stumble onto a version, you know, you eventually stumble into not trying, and then that makes people like listen because they're like, oh, hey, this is someone who's like just being themselves. They're not trying too hard or whatever. As you know from broadcasting, you know, it's hard work, but once you figure out how to do it, all of a sudden you realize that you are just talking and you're not affecting anything anymore. People start noticing and they go, wow, this is cool. This is someone who just is themselves. But I'll also say, as far as like getting an audience, and I'm not a famous person at all. I don't have the audience of people that are on TV or anything like that, but getting any kind of crowd, which I'm grateful for, probably does come down to the fact that both of those podcasts you mentioned, I was partnered up with someone else who is incredibly funny, and that we both brought something out of each other, whether it was Becky Lucas, who brought out my like ridiculous, sometimes mean, sometimes incredibly high-strung side, or whether it was Alexi who brought out my curious and sweet and earnest side. I think both of those people, we brought things out in each other, and that probably helped bring people in. I'm struggling with the whole branding thing. I don't understand why that's the thing at the moment, but I'm trying to lure people in with the brand of a guy with a guitar. And then they'll see a little more, hopefully.
So cheap, Cam, so cheap. All right, thanks so much, man. I'm really looking forward to the show. Can't wait till you come to town for the comedy festival. And yeah, we'll talk to you real soon.
Thanks for chatting with me, man. That was great.